Okay, to clarify, you think that someone who makes $10,000 a year should pay the same tax rate as someone who makes $100 million a year?
Uh, yeah, basically, yes.
For people who are seeking asylum from Mexico, where should they stay while they're seeking asylum?
They should probably, stay in Mexico.
Is capitalism a man-made system?
It's that's a hard question, I'm not sure.
I guess I can ask you specific questions. Like, is there an economic policy of Donald Trump's that you like?
Economic policy, it gets more complicated. So, I don't approve of his, form of tariffs at all, like, it's not good. Like, it doesn't if it were done in some more strategic manner with some better explanation, maybe. Uh, I don't like it, but I definitely heard the argument before of the sheer unpredictability of his argument, so sorry, of his tariffs, therefore, he's able to really shake up the markets, I guess, and get outcomes that really might end up being better, just I can't really see a strategy behind it.
Well, actually, you would expect that it's unlikely to lead towards benefits because if there's a lot of uncertainty within the market, wouldn't that be bad for the market?
Yeah, perhaps temporarily. I mean, even now we're seeing as he moves in the right direction, uh, the markets are reacting well to that.
Is there any good evidence that tariffs would be beneficial in the long run?
Uh, is there is there any tariffs? No, I wouldn't make that argument, no.
Okay. So then if it's bad in the short term and there's no good argument to say that
Yeah,
it's
I don't approve of them. That's what I was saying. I wasn't approving of the tariffs.
okay.
I was saying that it's not a clear-cut attack, I guess. It is pretty clear-cut, but it's not a what was I saying? Yeah, it's not the most straightforward issue, I guess.
So are you saying that Donald Trump is worse for the economy?
Overall, no. I think that lowering taxes, I think that, freeing trade, yes, I know necessarily not globally just yet. Maybe that gets better, but also internally, removing regulations would be a good thing for the economy.
Wait, to clarify, you want there to be freer trade.
Correct.
What do you consider free trade?
Free trade would mean, not as many regulations or barriers.
Okay. Well, then here'd be my question. Would you be in support of getting rid of a minimum wage?
Would I be in support of getting rid of minimum wage is
That's a
un
regulation and a barrier. That's
uh, let's see. No, because I'm not arguing pure capitalism, basically. Like, I understand, obviously, there will have to be regulations that will benefit the market. I think it's obviously a debated upon topic, but yeah, I would argue for that specific,
okay. Well, then
policy to
which
keep it on.
which specific regulations did Donald Trump get rid of that you agree with?
Which specific? So, I would say mostly the environmental stuff. At least this is from what I hear. Again, if you're asking me to point to,
Yeah, give
like,
me
I
give
don't know,
me any
specific.
specific environmental regulation that you agree with him getting rid of.
I would have to look that up. I don't have a specific one on my head, but I'm looking the direction of what he is, saying he will do. Um, so I trust that even if he doesn't fulfill on all of his promises, the direction is much more promising towards something I like as opposed to something I don't. Meaning lower taxes, um, like I said, lower regulations, things like that.
Lower taxes, lower regulations. Okay. So then here would be my question. Do you care about lower taxes for the lower and middle income individuals more or for rich people more?
I think should be equal.
Is there one that you care about more? Or are you indifferent?
What do you mean by care about?
Are you indifferent? Would you like say you could either have a tax cut for the middle class or you could have a tax cut for rich people? Which one would you prefer?
Um, I'd have personal interest, but I think as a matter of fairness and justness, it should be equal, the taxing rate towards everyone. I know it's hard, and but yeah,
Understand.
that's my in
Understand
principle
myself.
argument.
Okay, to clarify, you think that someone who makes $10,000 a year should pay the same tax rate as someone who makes $100 million a year?
Uh, yeah, basically, yes.
Really?
Yep.
Really? Can you tell me what percent that should be?
No, I can't tell you a specific percentage.
So,
Again, I'm trying to argue more in principle and less in policy because I'm
so to
less familiar with the
clarify,
tariffs.
let's say they want the tax to be 30%. You think there should be a 30% tax rate on $10,000 a year income? First the
I don't
galaxy.
know what the state taxes usually look like, state income taxes.
Okay, so it should be less than 30%. Should it be 20%?
Yeah, I'll lower it.
Less than 20%, right?
You're trying to, yeah,
Okay, so 10%.
you're trying to get me to a number. That's my point. Is that
I just want
policy
like a
wise?
general. Can I have a general range?
So
Under like under 10%?
let's just say between let's just say between 10 and 20 for now.
Between 10 and 20. So if everyone has 10 to 20%, so you're saying the person who makes $10,000 a year should have to pay at least $1,000 to $2,000 in taxes?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I,
Okay.
I
And
understand the
then the person who
infrastructure at the
makes $1
moment.
million, they pay 100 to 200,000. Right.
I'd like to point out the delineation from our original argument because we're trying to explain why I'm trying to critique mass amnesty, and you're here trying to explain to me, critique my tax rate on the economy. That's a totally different subject. I answered your questions, but the truth is they were a pivot.
Well, I asked you like what you see to be beneficial for the economy. You brought up like
Yes, and
reducing regulation and like lowering taxes. I referenced what should the tax rate be. You brought up that you support a same tax rate for every single person. I just questioned you specifically about that
great.
position.
Okay, I'll clarify for the for those who are confused and calling my view diabolical or something. I understand obviously the
I
sentiment
love that
behind it,
phraseology.
but I
Good phraseology for the people in the chat. Diabolical, I tell you.
nice. So what I'm saying is that out of just if you actually give an objection, that would be nice. If you want to think of what is just and what is fair, if we can have an infrastructure that would actually work and give success with that sort of policy plan, that would make the most sense and is the most coherent. So for all of those who are once again,
Go over that one more time.
so if there were to be a political infrastructure in the country that would work with that sort of uh, equal tax rate, that would make the most sense and it would be the most coherent.
It doesn't make the most sense. It does not make the most sense to tax someone making $10,000 a year the same as you tax someone making $100 million a year. For example, let me show you the ridiculousness of this perspective. Do you think someone who makes $5 a year in income should have to pay $1 in taxes?
$5 a year in income.
Yeah,
Should pay
they got
$5.
$5. Should they have to pay $1 in taxes?
This is actually a great question. I have no clue how it works with taxing in the US. Like
They got
in terms of
$5. They got a
if you have
five. They
$5
got a
to your name.
$5
Yeah.
bill. Like, should they have to pay $1 in taxes?
In principle, yeah. That's what I'm saying. In principle, yes. Can we get an objection instead of nothing?
Yeah, the objection is clearly just showing the ridiculousness of it. I'm just showing you like this is an intuitive barrier here, right?
Okay.
You think that someone should pay $1 on $5 of income.
Okay. I'll give you
So
a counter question.
you're
Is
telling
that
me
fair?
every time I got money when I was in high school, right,
Oh
from
no.
a
No,
friend,
that's not what I
say it'd
said.
be $5,
That's
right?
not what I
I
said.
had to pay taxes on that.
That's not what I said.
No, it is. It is because you said
I'm not trying to modify. I'm not trying to
listen,
modify
listen. You
to
said
include minors, for example, or
what?
like
Wait. Why not?
non-households. I'm not
Why not?
I gave you I
You
told you
said
many times.
you
I
said
don't
everyone
know.
should be the same tax rate, correct?
Yes, all the not everyone. Okay, you make me qualify every claim once again. Okay, I'll qualify the claim. So what I'm saying is under the legal tax code right now that we have based off of like who pays taxes, right? For example, not high schoolers and how the taxes are paid. I don't even know the percentage. I don't know which taxes are applied, but I'm saying they should be equal across all the people. That's all I'm saying in principle. It's a very straightforward view.
You're saying in principle. Okay, I'm really confused. You're saying you don't know the taxes at all. Okay.
I'm still from people think that because I said taxes in the US that I'm not from US because I had to say in the US, but I am in the US. Like that's
I have a question. Have you paid taxes in the U.S.?
I'm 18, so like no,
No, you haven't paid taxes yet. Well, then here's my
no.
question. Do you think have you gotten any level of income?
I haven't even made my argument for why we pay taxes.
Is it possible you can clarify that? Like, did you get
Clarify
any
what?
income?
Um yeah, I have
Okay.
like worked
Okay.
small gigs, I guess.
So should you have
Yes.
had to pay taxes on that?
No, because my household does.
So you didn't pay the taxes. You think your parents should have paid the taxes?
I think they do kind of. Oh, on my income? No,
So
not on my
your
income.
parents pay taxes on your income.
Not on my income. I clarified. I realized what your question was.
Okay, so you paid your taxes, right?
No, I didn't pay my income tax as a minor.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. So to clarify, you think all income should be taxed at the same rate, but the income that you took, you don't think should have been taxed at that rate?
I didn't say income. That was a provocation. I was saying, however, the taxes are applied again should be done equally. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I haven't made the claim about income tax yet, so I don't know why you're specifying that.
Okay, so you weren't referencing income tax?
I was just referencing taxes. Once again, I've been talking in principle this whole time. I feel like I have to
Yeah,
say this multiple
in
times.
principle references all kinds of taxes, which include income tax, correct?
No, the principle I'm referencing is the principle of taxing, period, of what taxing does and what it is. And it's taking money from basically what it is giving money to the government to pay for the services that they provide. And I'm saying that that should be done equally in principle. I've said this so many times. I'm 18.
Yeah, okay. But like
Mm.
if you're referencing any type of tax, that includes income tax, correct?
That's the thing. I'm not referencing any tax. I'm just referencing the idea of taxes, concepts of taxing, and how it should be done.
Which includes
Again,
which includes income tax, correct?
sure.
Okay. So if I reference income tax, that's referencing that record, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
So then what was the issue?
great. So let's say that's my point. Okay, sure. Let's say I'll agree with you. Trump is bad on the economy. Let's say I agree with you on that point. If we can agree that was a delineation anyway from the original argument about mass amnesty. But
O-
sure, I'll concede this point because it's tiring me. I
Okay.
don't know the empirics as well as you, and I went through that many times.
Thank you for the
But
challenging.
we can go
So
to
you agree with me that Trump is worse for the economy?
so let's say he's worse for the economy.
Okay.
Just to go back to our argument,
So given
if you're willing to go through that argument,
okay, so
because I
then
don't know if you want to.
okay,
You don't seem
so
to.
then when referencing immigration, you're not referencing the effect on the economy. You're referencing something else as to why
Sure,
you want
yeah,
to reduce immigration. Okay. What would be that reason?
absolutely. So I was explaining, I was talking about cultural unity. I think that if there's conflicting views of how I know moral structure should be, etc., that it would be bad to have so many conflicting views within a country, especially if they could lead to criminality.
Conflicting views within a country. Do you know what free speech is?
No, that's you're reducing. I was saying again, how if you have, let's say, terrorism was the example we gave, that would be a bad thing to have in a country, basically. That would be conflicting with the American view of how things are. Not all countries, some countries that isn't a conflicting
Yeah,
view.
so you're saying people that support that, which would again be applicable to Donald Trump, by the way. We already went over that within the context of Dean's
Yeah, with the
Live.
Qatar airplane, I kind of explained that like I don't view that as supporting. I view that as receiving. And again, I don't approve of it. So that's kind of
It's not just that. We could reference specifically how Donald Trump supports Netanyahu. We could reference like
yeah,
what's it
yeah,
called, Donald Trump's
that's also
support for Saudi Arabia, right?
again, it seems like every time I try to argue with you on the amnesty, you'll point to like Netanyahu, which, for example, we can totally have that argument,
Hold
but
up.
it's a different argument.
You're arguing the reason why you want to restrict immigration is to limit a specific qualifier for immigration would be that like that they haven't
I'm pointing out a good
given
thing
that
Donald
they
Trump is
give
doing.
it hold up
That's what I'm doing.
given that they support terrorism or something like that, which one could be applicable to Donald Trump, but two, right, that's not encompassing, right? We can, if you don't want to talk about that, we can talk about others. What other specific condition or qualifier would you have for immigration, for why you want to restrict immigration?
Ooh, a qualifier for immigration. Apart from that one, I'd have to think. I don't know. That doesn't take away from the view that amnesty without without any qualifications would definitely not be good.
Well, there are still qualifications.
Sorry,
You haven't committed a violent crime or a bad crime.
would be one. That would definitely be a qualification on the list for sure.
Wait, say that more time.
I'm saying that would definitely be a qualification on the list. But my point is the burden of proof is on explaining why amnesty, which basically is just saying without any sort of screening, every single person gets allowed. Um, that's totally different than having a list of qualifications, which we can totally like. I can look more into and I can make more specific.
All right.
Nonetheless, it
All
takes
right.
away from the idea that amnesty is good. That
Okay.
obviously doesn't
All right. Is there anything
work.
else you'd like to talk about or add on the line?
Yeah, I guess I would end with a closing statement that if amnesty just seeks to allow everybody that's already in here without any sort of qualifications or screening stay in there, then that would be bad for the country. And it sounds like my claim hasn't been rebutted properly, but if we can end there, it's cool with me.
Oh, I'll continue talking if you want to address it that way. You say that like you need to have, of course, you need to have certain conditions, but the certain conditions you're applying in terms of immigration, right? One, I wouldn't necessarily agree with, and two, you don't apply to the president of the United States. The same conditions you say, oh, if they've committed a violent crime or a bad crime, right? Donald
No,
Trump
I'm just
is a
arguing that
convicted criminal held civilly liable of
I'm
a
arguing
woman.
that I'm arguing that there's a more coherent argument to enforce immigration the way Donald Trump is than to allow mass amnesty. That's all I'm saying. That's been my argument the whole time.
Wait, say that one more time. Sorry.
My argument the whole time has been that it is more coherent and is better to enforce immigration the way Donald Trump has been, as opposed to mass amnesty, because mass amnesty has the
One,
problems
that's a
I've pointed out. I'm
one.
critiquing. I'm not providing.
I understand,
No,
but what you're engaging in is a false dichotomy. You're saying it's either 100% mass amnesty or Donald Trump, and that's not it at all, right? And even if it was that, mass amnesty
no,
across the board
I'm
would be
not. I'm
better
just
than
comparing
Donald
the two.
Trump's.
I'm not saying those are the only two options. I'm comparing the two, and I'm saying it is more coherent and logical, and it is better to have Donald Trump's in implementation of immigration policy than one that would make it very easy for all the current illegal immigrants to just become immigrants, to become legal citizens without any sort of proper screening qualification that would be at least equal to, probably more because they already went illegally, but at least equal to the qualifications that would be required if they began the process legally, if that makes sense.
I'm honestly not following you.
Okay, so I'm saying that if you were to do a mass amnesty implementation where you allow them to, where you facilitate them to become citizens, you'd have to make them go at least through the same qualifications that would have to go through if you were to legally become a
It's totally
citizen.
fine, totally fine. And
Is that your
those,
view?
yeah, those qualifications being that if you haven't committed a violent crime or a bad crime.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's just that. I think cultural unity would be an important
Can you give me
consideration.
examples of what cultural unity is relevant to? Because I
Like
don't see that to be a relevant
no
factor.
supporting terrorist organizations
That's
again.
the only
And this was
example
on
you've
Trump's
given.
immigration
That is the
policy,
only example
and
you've
I'll stick
given.
to that
Yet you one,
example.
you can't clarify it, and two, I asked for a
Clarify how do you want it
secondary
to be
reason. Can
clarified?
you would you like to
Let's
provide a
stick with that
secondary
reason.
reason?
No, let's stick with that reason. What
It's
how would you like it
only
clarified?
support for terrorism, right? I'm sorry, you have other qualifiers.
I don't see why we have to go through them right
What
now. We're
other qualifiers for
going through
cultural
one.
unity? What cultural unity are you referencing?
I would have to, again, like I said, I would have to look into it more and parse it out better. But right now, I'm happy to parse out. I'm happy to parse out the terrorist.
Would you like to give
Uh,
me any
thing.
examples that you think of in your head when you say that?
When you think of terrorists, I'm confused.
Is that it, dude?
What are you? I'm sorry. What's your question?
I'm asking you any other thing that you're referencing in terms of cultural unity that would be relevant other than quote unquote terrorism.
No, I explained that. No, I don't have those parsed out yet. No, I'm sticking with this one for now, and we can talk about it,
So that,
or we don't have to. Like if you don't want
so
to,
cultural
you seem to
unity
not want
only
to.
the only aspect of our culture that you want unity on is to be against terrorism.
No, that's just the one that I have most clearly available to argue.
Is there anything else you could argue or talk about?
Not properly right now. Not
Okay.
with your
Would
knowledge
you
on the
like to go
terms.
do your research?
I could, and I could also continue on the terrorist point, unless you disagree with that for some reason.
We've already talked about this. Would you like to define terrorism again?
I don't think I did define terrorism. I would say it would be uh the violence that would be to like what's it called? Acts of violence for this is a bad definition. It's more, but acts of violence for political purposes designed to instill terror, I guess, and discourage certain political act. That would be off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's a better formal one.
Okay. So like to clarify, would you think that then the January 6 insurrectionists were like terrorists that committed acts of
Um,
violence at like
I don't
police
think they're.
officers like assaulted them? Would they be
I don't think it
terrorists?
would be. I don't think it would be fair to call them terrorists.
That meets your definition.
I don't think they meet my definition. I don't think they're trying
What?
to scare.
They committed acts of violence in specific to like instill terror.
I don't think they're trying to instill terror and fear into
Yeah,
like.
for political purposes, yeah, they were trying to overturn the results of the election they thought was stolen.
Sure. Okay, I'll concede all these points because again, we're unaddressing the point of
Okay, so then
immigration we're getting
did
on.
Donald
It's
Trump
because I'm not trying to argue all those points. I
to
know you have them
to
parsed out, and I
clarify
don't.
to clarify, Donald Trump pardoned terrorists.
You're doing this again and again. Why do you think I'm conceding the point? It's because I haven't looked into it and parsed it out like you have. Instead, I am trying to talk about what I do know. Why would we keep on trying to shift the conversation to what I don't know? That is clearly like a tactic to make me have a weaker position in general. It doesn't weaken my main position on amnesty. It really doesn't.
What? I don't know why you're not addressing this point at all. Would you like to?
I'll explain to you why I'm not addressing the point. Because this point does not have anything to do with my critique on amnesty. It has nothing to do with my critique on amnesty. I don't have it parsed out to make the case for the January Sixers.
This
So
isn't
that
a
still doesn't have
you
anything
didn't
to
give a
do.
critique on amnesty. All you
Yes,
did
I
was
did. I said that the qualifiers aren't good.
all you gave was a false dichotomy of either
What was the false dichotomy?
masked amnesty, or Donald Trump's uh, uh, position on immigration.
I said out of those two options, not dichotomy doesn't means that those are the only two options. I'm not saying those are the only two options. I'm not even supporting Trump as the best like potential conservative candidate or whatever. I'm just pointing out from comparing it to amnesty, then yes, it is better to do what Trump is doing, which at least has some sort of qualifications and screenings, as opposed to again, which I don't know of, which are much better than just mass amnesty. That would be really strange. If the only qualifications are just have they been done criminal.
But like for example, you could have different set of qualifications than Donald Trump. You could let more people come into the country, right?
Maybe,
That's another
maybe,
example. Okay, so then,
maybe. I just think
okay,
it's better to do what
okay. Well, I mean, I don't know why you're comparing it to something that I'm not holding to, or to no one's holding to. No one's arguing zero restrictions.
the restrictions you were arguing. I disagreed with. You just said if they committed any violent acts before.
Violent crime or bad crime, yeah.
Great. I think if they have terroristic ideology, they shouldn't be allowed. That's another thing.
Okay.
If that's all we're arguing about, then yes, I'll argue that I don't like your qualifications. I think we should include that
Okay.
singular one.
Well then again, why would you be okay with Donald Trump pardoning a terrorist then, under your perspective?
I never said I was.
You're wait, but he literally pardoned people who again engaged in terroristic ideology.
Okay, did I tell you like that I disagreed?
Wait, okay. Did you tell me that you disagreed? Well, I'm just saying that like you voted for Donald Trump, so like, do you like stand
I
behind
didn't
that?
vote. I never said that.
Oh,
I
okay.
said I would.
You okay?
Sorry, yeah, that was a pointless objection. Yeah,
That was an incredibly pointless objection. Now, would you like to
yeah.
respond to the point?
Point was why would I? Because I think his immigration policy is good.
Like, you think his Can you give me an example of an immigration policy?
Sure. So stay in Mexico. I think that's good.
Okay. What process of immigration does that apply to?
Asylum.
Okay. For people who are seeking asylum from Mexico, where should they stay while they're seeking asylum?
They should probably stay in Mexico. Yeah,
Doesn't
like not across the border.
doesn't that like defeat the process and like the reason why you would engage in the asylum process?
No, they could be given some protection, but they shouldn't be in the US.
What protection?
Uh, I don't have to outline that specifically. Again, you keep on going to the specifics, but yes, they should be protected in Mexico. That is my claim.
But how?
How?
Should they get
Why?
bodyguards?
Okay. Maybe not bodyguards.
Same,
Maybe
you
they
think of
should
the
stay in a
galaxy.
protected area. Maybe we should have some patrol people making sure that a specific
Like
location is safe for them to be in.
So we're gonna go into Mexico and we're gonna establish protected areas for asylum seekers
Again,
in
that's not
Mexico.
my.
How is
Again, that's not even my expertise.
in
The implementation. You keep going to the
wouldn't the
implementation.
country of Mexico have to do that? It sounds like what you're doing is a camp, by the way, that's in Mexico.
Okay, it doesn't have to be. My point is that I'm not trying to get to the implementation. I'm trying to get to what makes sense in principle, and it makes sense in principle to not let them be in our country.
Okay, if we're talking about what makes sense in principle, we have to talk about what is going to be applied to circumstances.
Sure. So should they?
Because principles are only going to be useful insofar as that you can apply them.
Here, I can. I'll give you a question. So, if you were to grant my point that illegal immigration is bad for the country, right? I know you disagree, but let's say you were to grant that, and you were to say, okay, they have to be in the US, and you would say, oh, but they need to go to trial to see if their asylum claim is valid, right? How would you propose that happens? Do you keep them in a camp in the US, as the commenters are saying, or would you let them free and let them complete continue with the loophole that they're exploiting now? You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, you let them stay in the United States. You just make the process of processing them through the courts faster.
Yeah, no, I'd agree that they should be processed through the courts faster, either rejected or affirmed, depending on, of
Well,
course,
then you
whether
agree
they
with
claim
the
is valid.
well, then you agree with the bipartisan border bill that Donald Trump called for people in Congress to undermine.
Well, I also think that what's it called? I also think that most of the people that are claiming asylum aren't truly in situations of asylum, but instead they're looking for economic opportunity in the US and not looking for asylum. So, but the whole
What it?
claim,
Okay, wait. So can you? So you're saying that looking for economic opportunity is not a valid claim for asylum?
no, asylum, you'd have to be persecuted, right? And it would be a
Yeah, based
push
on some
factor, not a
protected
pull
class.
factor.
Based on some protected class, is class one of them?
What do you mean on based on some protective class? I don't understand that.
Yeah. That's what the asylum process is based on. It's based upon the protection of individuals based upon
Who are
certain protected
persecuted.
classes who have been persecuted. Yeah,
Yeah, so I just don't
and
think that if you're looking for economic opportunity, that means you're being persecuted.
okay,
I think if you like economic opportunity, it doesn't mean you're
uh,
being persecuted.
okay. So then, are you saying that like certain countries where people are starving, right? If there's like say like a famine, should they be allowed to seek asylum?
I guess I'd have to modify not persecution, but also natural disaster. And in that case, yes, they should be allowed in because they are trying not to die.
Let's say the famine is human caused.
Let's say the famine is human caused. Sure. I don't see why that would make a difference.
Okay. So then under your view then would that then persecution based upon class would then qualify. So for economic conditions because of persecution based upon class, someone can qualify for the asylum process under your view, right?
What are you saying?
So
Persecution based upon class?
yeah.
I don't think class means that they're necessarily being persecuted by somebody who's depriving them of economic opportunity. I don't think that's what a class is.
Well, someone depriving them of economic opportunity, right, could be within the
I just don't
context.
view it under that dichotomy. I don't see either you're in a class, so you're in a lower class, which means you must be persecuted by
That's not what I said.
sorry, what are you saying?
I just said that you apply the asylum process to those in which have been persecuted based upon class. That's a protected
Sorry.
class, correct?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So, okay. So then you're saying that people should be allowed to seek asylum for better economic conditions, correct?
No, how did you reach the logical conclusion?
Well, that's because you said that a protected class would be class. So their access to economic resources. So access to economic resources is a valid claim for asylum.
I didn't see how you took my statements and turned that into a I'm saying that any class that's looking for economic opportunity is allowed in through asylum. I said that if you're being persecuted, let's say if you're in an induced famine, like you said, by some man-made famine, then yes, you can argue, look, I'm in the class of people who have this famine induced upon them
Is
by
cap
other people,
is
and
cap
therefore I should be allowed in.
is
Not
ca-
because of economic opportunity, but because they are inducing a famine upon me.
is capitalism a man-made system?
Uh, it's- that's a hard question. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay. So then the persecution is caused by like people.
When did I
Therefore,
say that?
if they have bad economic conditions, that is persecution based upon class that they could then claim a valid
You did
asylum claim
not.
for.
I did not say no. I did not say they're being persecuted
Okay, what is
if they are
persecution?
looking for economic opportunity.
What's persecution?
Persecuted. Goodness, keep on asking me for formal definitions here. Persecuted, I guess, would be somebody who's in a position that is disadvantageous. Sorry, someone that's put in a position of power, any power, that allows them to inflict some sort of damage or disadvantage towards another group of person. That's off the top of my head how I would define persecution.
Okay, so if people are economically disadvantaged, isn't that the case that they're economically disadvantaged based upon the current economic model, which is capitalism, which is man-made. Seems like they're then being persecuted
I
based
haven't
upon
conceded that
their
it's
class.
man-made, but
You didn't
also
concede that
no.
capitalism is man-made. Okay, so is
Yeah,
what was
you asked me.
what was capitalism made by?
I think capitalism allows people to, buy property,
I understand.
allows them. Yeah,
What was capitalism made by?
I don't. I think it's kind of it's almost a
Human
natural.
beings. Human
It's on.
beings,
Yes,
dude.
all trade is like. What's your point? I'm saying that
I'm
it
just
could be a
I'm
natural manifestation of human trade. Could be capitalism.
okay. Capitalism is a man-made economic model.
Let's say it's a natural manifestation of human
it is
trade.
a human-made
Did you hear
economic
me?
model.
I don't know if you heard me.
I would-
I was saying I was saying it's a natural manifestation of human trade. So if you want to blame it on people for just
Capitalism is
how it goes,
I'm sorry to break it to you. Capitalism is not the natural manifestation of human trade because it has a process in between bartering that has a medium of exchange. That is by nature not the
you're
natural
saying the
process.
fact there's
The natural
currency. Okay,
process
fine.
would be the natural process for human trade would be bartering.
Okay. I don't think you can blame humanity that
A
or
human
any country
made
that
medium of
enforces.
I just want to clarify.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
human
Sorry, a
made
human-made medium of what?
medium of exchange is an aspect of the market, plus capitalism is a specific mode of production, meaning it's referencing the relationship between the employer and the employee in
Yes.
ownership.
So your original claim would be that because it is man-made, the people who are in the suffering class of a capitalist economy can claim that they're being persecuted.
Yes, based upon a protected class of class.
Oh, okay. Yes. So
I see
I don't
no
agree.
reason why not.
Okay. So I think just because something is human made, it doesn't mean that they are inflicting a persecution. They are creating a system in which opportunity is available. So even I don't think it's causing harm or inflicting damage. I don't think capitalism inflicts damage to the poor because it is capitalism and human made. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I'm gonna clarify with you. Okay, so if you want to talk about like certain conditions, economic conditions, you're saying capitalism has never led to people in lower classes
Led and responsible is
being
different.
discriminated against. Well, I just want to explain to you. That's why we have social safety nets. That's why we have minimum wage laws.
Yeah, I haven't
That's why we
argued
have
against
the
those. I
work
haven't even
weekend.
argued for permanently for a
Hold up,
like a
I'm
what's
still
called a
finishing.
purely capitalist argument. But yeah, but you're arguing a null. Like I'm not saying that, so why would you argue that?
Well, that's the point. Is that you're not referencing that pure version of capitalism.
No, I'm not. I'm referencing the capitalistic. Like I'm saying that the poor people, let's say in Mexico, if Mexico's capitalist, right? So I'm saying the sorry, I'm saying the people who are you're claiming are persecuted by the system in Mexico. I wouldn't say that they are counted as people persecuted by
Listen,
other
listen.
people
I'm just saying these are totally separate. It's not
and
just people. It's not just
deserving of
people.
asylum.
It's not just people in Mexico. I'm talking about around the entire world. People could be persecuted based upon a protected notion of class, and if it meets a particular threshold, they can meet the claim for asylum. So again, we're just clarifying that people who are coming to the country for economically better conditions can meet within the criteria of asylum.